Hey guys, this is Velde from Moji here. Danish Counter-Strike is one hell of a drug, but so is Thorin's YouTube channel.
It's simply a nightmare for Na'Vi right now in the electronic domain. No matter what they do, they're just a bit good, aren't they? At the end of the day, far from perfecto. Blade, quite dull at this point in time. Not that sharp at all. Nothing at all to get your nipples in. Well, you get what I'm doing with that one. Tell you what, the last time the goat was in this much trouble, I was in the mood for a kebab. I had a tub of garlic sauce in one hand and a gentleman with a big knife next to me from Turkey. Kebab reference, obviously. So you can get GamerSupps, the goat of energy formulas, which is far from a nightmare because it's a dream. You can get 10% off with the code Thorin, Thorin, at gamersupps.gg. Now, Na'Vi, Natus Fincer, when they had Boomich, for these players, were the best team in the world. They won the Grand Slam, they won the Major, they won all the lands that year, a whole bunch of lands. Then they came in the next year, last year, they were still in the major final. They were still in the final of Cologne. They could have won both of those events, quite frankly. They were still a top four team. They were still a team that would always make the playoffs. They were a team that you started to be world-class to beat. s1mple was the player of the year last year, even on a down year. This year, 2023, they are just a woeful contender because they keep going down in the rankings, then coming back up with the odd win, especially earlier in tournaments, getting to like those semis and then doing fuck all, getting beaten by the squads they used to handle, almost never beating the elite teams. And if they do, it's just in the matches that don't matter that much. Like, this is a team with so many problems right now. And quite frankly, s1mple, who's recovered a bit of his form, he even has his issues, Ziwu-esque in sort of elimination maps and series. But beyond him, there's just so little left to the team. And it reminds me of the old s1mple teams he carried, where him being good actually covers flaws elsewhere in the team, that if he was even like 20% less good or 10% less good, you'd just have to make changes. But there's obviously also other considerations as to why they can't. So they're ranked number 7 in the world by HLTV right now. That sounds about right. They've played in 4 full lands this year, including the major, and 2 qualifiers. They had the Blast Spring groups, and then they had the RMR. They made it to 0 finals. They had 3 top 4s. They went out like this. In Katowice, they got bodied by Heroic in the semi-finals. By the way, Heroic as a team, they always had a psychological edge on and handled when it mattered. They beat Heroic at EPL, a studio LAN with fuck all people watching. s1mple popped off, and that was earlier in the tournament, round of 8, I think. Then they just got trounced by FaZe in the last 2 maps in the semi-finals. s1mple had some good games, but he wasn't the old s1mple, and they just looked whack. FaZe went on to win the tournament. They were able to... they lost to Heroic, obviously, in Rio. They had like an overtime on Overpass. Again, that's a tournament that's right there for you taking. I mean, Heroic's a team that'll just immediately bend over if someone with a superstar player pops off and you come with the heat and you really put them under pressure. But nope, you're letting them go to the final. And then in the major, they were right there in the RMR to go through in the 2-2 game. They were playing against FaZe, who even in the 3rd map of this series, Anubis, looked absolutely there for the taking. Electronic was going crazy, but Brokey and some FaZe Heroics just stole that game away from them with an insane amount of rounds to come back and then to win in an epic overtime session. And it's just the story of Na'Vi. They're just not the team that wins the clutch match. They're not the team that wins the important matches. When they do, it's a fairly inconsequential win that just keeps you having false hope. s1mple is still a world-class player. He's still probably a top 5 player. There's times when he pops off in series, but even he fades later in the tournaments. And quite frankly, there's still echoes of what happened at Rio, the major last year. And they've just never been the team they were when they had Sumdai Young. Not that Sumdai Young was the factor, but they've just, all that whole period with Boomich, the hangover effect from that lasted a little while, and then s1mple was just really good still, and Electronic could still be really good. And ever since then, it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And what have they even got as a team now? Like, you look at them as a team, against top 5 ranked teams this year in best of 3 play, they've won 4 games, 4 series, and lost 6 series. They've won 9 maps and lost 12 maps. In the Blast groups to start the year, they just lost to G2 twice, got 2-0'd. Then at Katowice, in the group, they beat Team Liquid thanks to an overtime map. Now, that's just Team Liquid, who had a very bad tournament and obviously can be very up and down on riding that ranking of performances last year. Then they lost out to G2 in the same group, just getting banged by G2 every single time. They beat Outsiders in the round of 8 of Katowice. Now, everyone knows Outsiders had their own issues with the roster and just were never that good a team since they won the major. They lost to Heroic in the semis, though, like I say, easily handled. They came back and beat Heroic in the EPL next in the round of 8. Okay. but then they just got handled by FaZe, who actually, by the way, wasn't even at the time a top 5 ranked team. Don't even bother mentioning that. Then in the RMR, FaZe was ranked number 2, thanks to winning EPL and the Grand Slam. They 2-0'd them, but who gives a fuck? It was just a game in the RMR. Not for FaZe, it was consequential because they ended up having to go through that qualifier eventually. But this was like the 2-0 game as well. There wasn't pressure here. Then in IM Rio, they got all the way to the semis after some bullshit opponents, by the way. Go look who they played. And then they managed to lose to Heroic, got handled again by Heroic. Then at Blast, like I said, in the 2-2 game, they got beaten by FaZe. How disappointing. What an end. They're not even making the major playoffs. And this was a playoffs that had been wide open if you could have made it there. Then you expand it out and put in top 10 ranked teams. It adds 2 more series, which was in EPL in the round of 12. The playoffs is like massive in EPL now. They beat Outsiders again, but Outsiders have just done fuck all this year. And then in EPL, like I said, in the semis, the number 7 ranked team was Outsiders then. Number 7 ranked team in the same tournament was, because the update during the tournament with EPL goes on in HLTV, was FaZe, and they lost 1-2. You see, this year, it just ain't it, is it? Look at the players, right? s1mple isn't even s1mple because he's got 1.19. But even so, that's still really good. That's still like a top 5, top 6, 7 player in the world. That's very good for an AWPer even. That's still good. Yeah, it's not Zero level, but still very, very good. Shiro maybe slightly better. There's a couple of AWPers out there, but still very, very good for a star player. Fragging is awesome on the KD. Then you go down. Electronic has a good rating because he's electronic. He can still get those. He can still frag. He can still entry and have impact. But the problem is, because of his roles, he dies a lot. And so as a result, you go, look, the kill to death, well, it's not really that great at all. Now, Bit has an all right kill to death differential. He's fragging okay, but he's just generally not that top of player. And he's just never a star on this team. And he really has faded quite a lot. And the problem, obviously, is Electronic has to be the IGL. Then you go down, Perfecto's all right. He's just always all right, Perfecto. He's just a solid player. You can't expect him to be a star, though. And at times he has been expected to carry to get Na'Vi out of trouble, and that just wasn't good enough. And MPL is just trash. His kills are crap. His kill to death differential is crap. He has plenty of maps. His rating is crap. He's just a trash player. I just don't think he is good in any context. So when you look at the squad, like s1mple, his problem is he's good until some of the elimination games. How whack. Electronic just dies too much and he's not a good IGL. So do you change him off IGL? Well, then he's been off on IGL for so long. Will it ruin his game a little bit? I don't know. Mechanically, he's still good. Then the question is, who do you get as an IGL? Get to that in a second. On the Bit one, you can try going back and changing his roles to wherever they were in 2021. Maybe that would work. I don't think Blade's an idiot. I don't know if that will work. Maybe they have tried these things in scrims. It didn't work. Quite frankly, at this point in time, I'm up for potentially replacing him, especially if they were willing to recruit a Russian player, which I don't know if they would. Because if they would, obviously, I know there'd be political implications there. There are some really good riflers in the Russian scene right now. Are there that many that are in the Ukrainian scene? Can people really name them beyond some of the players on Monty? And even then, let's be real, you'd probably take a 1-2K as an AWPer, right? So actually, yeah, Boris is obviously not from Ukraine. So yeah, what are you doing in this scenario if you keep him with the same language, but you can't take Russian players? Then in terms of Perfecto, I'm just keeping him. Like, there's nothing wrong with Perfecto. Yeah, even he doesn't win some of the clutches, but spoiler, people have more health, there's worse comms. Like, he's in not as good situations. Like, players like that are not going to be as good. People like him and Zipnix, I'm talking about when Zipnix was still good, can't perform at the same level without the platform of the rest of the team and the system. Like I said, NPL just has to be kicked. It's been too long now. I was willing to let it ride for a long time because I think Blade is very, very intelligent about Counter-Strike, but this just has not worked. I really wonder if he's sort of like forced on the team as like a cheap player. They wanted to ride out to CS2. I don't know what angle it could be, but I don't know what he can see in this player. There's nothing there for me. So when it comes down to the IGLing side, that's what's so criminal. Because who the hell would ever say Electronic was a top IGL? It's never even been whispered about, by the way. I mean, does anyone even look at Na'Vi and think the T sides are good? Not really. And then you go look at who's doing work. On the T side, it's just s1mple as usual doing fragging. Everyone else is mega negative. It's just not particularly good at all. I mean, Electronic's Electronic, so he can get a good rating because he can get open the kills. Perfecto's just a solid player. Bit's just whatever at this point in time, just whatever. You go to opening kills. Okay, s1mple himself is doing 17%, so not that much. Obviously, now he's not that aggressive a player. You've got Electronic and Bit. I mean, Bit's just not good. Electronic's, I mean, it's just hard, isn't it? What have you got here? You've got nothing. And then you go to CT side, the whole story. s1mple can be really successful with his opening, so he has to be aggressive, and he's just carrying the fuck out your team. Electronic's just a solid fragger. He's got good mechanics. Bit's okay. Perfecto's fine. On T side, Still fragging from s1mple, but he's not the one doing it. There's just nothing here, guys. There's absolutely nothing here. And the only reason this team survives and gets wins is because on CT's side, look who carries the fuck out of the games. Even Electronic is a monster CT side still. Bits all right. Obviously, Fragging's good. Perfecto doing his job. It's just CT sides. It's s1mple making plays on CT side and open. And then a couple of you good riflers sitting in their spots and shooting you on the head. What does this team have? I mean, to me, this is a team that badly needs an aggressive rifler at this point in time. They need someone else who can contribute fragging and could potentially be part of that entry pack. That's how you're going to do it. Or they need a really good IGL to replace MPL. One of the two. If you give me one of the two, we can maybe start to work with this. We can maybe do something. And another issue, I've referenced it already, is the whole conflict issue, that conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and the fact it's drawn out this long. Like, I've done a video about s1mple where I do give them a pass. I do give him a pass to some degree. Like, there is an asterisk, but the results still count. That's just the way it works, because for the other teams, they have to count. So my problem comes with the idea, is this conflict actually affecting recruitment? Are the two players who stayed because they took off their flags and all that jazz about Russia, does that mean that you're allowed to have 2 Russians but none more? Because if so, the problem is we can't replace those 2 players. They seem like the ones you have to keep. If we can't bring in a 3rd Russian or any other Russians, then quite frankly, it's going to be really hard for Na'Vi to improve, because their golden generation of Russian talent is upon us and has been for the last year and a half, which unfortunately is very ironic when you consider the timing of when all these conflicts occurred. I mean, even players who aren't necessarily part of it, like Inters, wouldn't he be a great addition instead of MPL? Can't bring him in, he's Russian, right? I'm presuming. Jerry, wouldn't he be an interesting pickup as an IGL? Someone who probably should have had a shot years and years ago, sort of the snappy of the Russian scene. He's Russian, isn't he? And also, you seemingly can never be pried away from 4s. By the way, the reason why, unfortunately, I do suspect, not just because they haven't had any rumours that they get Russian players, but that this is a consideration, is because there's this whole thing recently, which I don't know that I'll do any content about it, but if you go and look in their like Hall of Fame on the Na'Vi website, they've just gone and removed Edward and Starix. Now, they're Ukrainian players, and by the way, Starix is the reason there even is a Na'Vi as a great org, because he put together that first 1.6 lineup, and then Edward was the second star, the star rifler of the team that won the 4 majors, and by the way, they were the second and third stars of that team, and you're going to remove them over what? As far as I can tell, they've said nothing wrong. They've done nothing wrong. It's just something like they haven't spoken out and said the words, the compelled speech. Tell you what, look in history at the kinds of people who may compel you to say things and demand that you... They're not the good guys, mate. What's going on here? What's going... Really? You're going to take Hall of Fame players out? Well, in that case, Na'Vi shouldn't be a Hall of Fame org then. How about that? If you're going to disrespect the people who built your org. So that does imply to me that this means we can't even consider the Russian players. So who is there in the Ukrainian scene at this point in time? Right, Monacy's an AWPer, so you don't take him in because you got s1mple, right? You could have had Headtrick. He actually looks like, quite frankly, if you kept him on the rifle, he could have been a solid player, but you sold him to make some cash to NIP. I don't know if you can get him back or what at this point in time. And that's it, right? NPL didn't work out. Wonderful's really strong, but he's an AWPer. Who are the players? And for IGLs, I mean, forget about it, right? Like, there's no one on Monty. They were swapping around themselves. If you say Chopper, I say, fuck you. The only Chopper I care about was that movie with Eric Bana. Go look it up. Chopper's just average as fuck, and Spirit was never that great. And spoiler, how's Spirit doing this year, dickhead? Exactly, not very good. Part of the issue, I have to say, finally, that I think about this team is I do think Blade is a brilliant mind. But one of the issues I thought he had in his flip side teams even is the perfect is the enemy of the good, as we say. So sometimes going for perfection and this super intricate style and this detailed style and all those pages of notes. And listen, there are elements that work nicely. They still sometimes have discipline on sites to stay in or to entry as a pack. But there are other elements that are just totally missing. There are aspects of slow play that just don't work for them anymore and can't get onto the site and get the bomb down. There are times when the utility just doesn't seem like it's traded appropriately to get the kind of openings they want, and then they don't have the fragging that they need to get it done. And all of this is putting insane pressure on the back of s1mple, who already has all this shit going on in the background. And so you can't really expect them to be 2018 s1mple and hard carry you to titles. So Na'Vi is in a nightmare dilemma right now. Do you kick people? If so, who do you replace them with? Are you allowed to get Russian players? If so, is that going to cause some sort of controversy? No one knows what's even going on right now. There might even be a world now where maybe you should just let s1mple have an extended break, figure out the lineup, and then come back in CS2. There's a world where I almost feel like that would be better than burning him out now or pissing him off or just wasting everyone's time. Like, what is the point of Na'Vi at this point? It's sad because the potential's still there with like one change, maybe even, to be right back in the mix to win tournaments, to be in finals again, to give s1mple the platform from which a virtuoso single series carry can bring you a trophy. But there's all these factors swirling around them, and beyond basically like Perfecto just being solid and Electronic being able to frag still. What is there in this team? Even s1mple looks worse in the elimination games. Like, there's s1mple who got banged out at Rio last year in the quarters. There's s1mple who got his head smashed in this 2-2 game against Monty. That's not s1mple, mate. That's not the greatest player of all time. If someone came to me from another game, or when CS2 comes out and goes, oh, you told me this s1mple guy's the GOAT. Let me go and look at the last 2 majors he played. I'd be like, whoa, no, don't do that. Don't do that. Go to the majors before that. Any of the majors before that, even the ones where we weren't the good, like any of them. Like, that would be sad, wouldn't it? And it'd be sad if this is how Na'Vi ends CSGO. This was one of the greatest cores we'd ever seen. And they're just going to go out with a whimper instead of a bang, as the old cliche goes. As Mary J. Blige said in her track, All I Need, you're all I need to get by, which is the case for me and my Patreon community who support this channel and these videos. Some of them include Theogony, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Joseph Adcock, Tosh, Bot Pounder 420, Thooorin, Animosity, Tobias Bernasconi, Jensen Goh, Yurka, and a special thanks always to the main man, Jerky's Minion. Would you like to ask a question in my regular video AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who upcoming guests are. Maybe you want to suggest a topic or a guest for my content, or you want to take part in one of those longer esports discussions with me where we go all over the place. Well, if any of those grab your fancy, put your money where your mouth is, join the Risk Illuminati today via the Patreon link in the description box below.